Hello everyone and welcome to one of the best games that was played in the preliminary phase of the Freestyle Chess Grand Slam Paris tournament. Magnus Carlsen versus Nodirbek Abdusattorov in round 8 of the event. You guys will absolutely love this one. If this was played in a normal classical way, the chess is played without scrambled pieces, this game would be, all over the place. It would be everywhere, you know. Maybe even in books, but here, as it's played in freestyle chess, we're just going to enjoy it and then probably forget about it, but we'll see what happens. I thought you guys didn't enjoy this freestyle chess business all that much, but seems like you do. So yeah, let's dive straight into it. This one will make your head spin. So let's check it out. Magnus with white opens with pawn to f4, and like in all the other positions where the pieces are scrambled, the idea is pretty simple. You open up the queen, you open up the bishop if you can with one move. You already have a rook behind the pawn, so f4 is definitely the move. Even though players are now not allowed engines to prepare for the game, f4 is the top move recommended by the engine, and this can be met with many moves. Like you could go for something like c6, d5, maybe e5 later on. You could go for f5, f6. Everything goes. Here Nodirbek strikes with pawn to f6. Pretty much the same idea, grabs a bit less space, but okay, opens up the light square bishop, opens up the queen, and it makes sense. And Magnus plays pawn to d4, which is not the best, and already you have a position that could never happen in regular chess, because it's very unlikely that Magnus would make such a move on move 2 that allows black to completely equalize. Here, if Nodirbek strikes with e5, that is a very good position for him. For example, captures. Capturing doesn't do all that much because rook captures on f1 is good for black, and if you don't capture, for example, you advance the pawn, which makes sense. Then you grab the full center, something like c6, c3, pawn to d5, and black enjoys a very nice game. But Nodirbek seems to trust Magnus, plays pawn to d5, keeps it symmetrical, and now Magnus strikes with pawn to e4, and we have d captures on e4 again. Queen to h5 check is definitely a possibility, but Nodirbek goes d captures on e4. Queen captures on e4 and knight to d6. Chases away Magnus's queen. Queen back to e2 and now pawn to c6. We have pawn to c3 and bishop to c7. Knight to g3 and Nodirbek castles queenside. You've cleared pretty much everything. Now it's time to castle. Knight to d3 and bishop to c4. Pins the knight. We have bishop to c2. Magnus also with ideas of maybe castling queenside. Pawn to e6. And here we have pawn to b3. Bishop to b3 is also very nice, with the idea that if bishop captures, you can maybe open up your a file. And if not, if black just keeps the tension, then you try to undermine the knight with knight e4 and then basically force black to capture. But okay, b3 by Magnus. We have knight to b5, going after the c3 pawn. This would win the queen, as it would come with check. Magnus plays queen to d2, and now bishop to a5, putting more pressure on that c3 pawn. And Magnus says, yes, bring it on. He plays b captures on c4. Probably Nodirbek was thinking, okay, I give a check, then Magnus moves the king, or maybe I capture and then Magnus moves the queen. But after bishop captures on c3, Magnus doesn't move the queen, as you guys probably already know from the thumbnail. Even though queen c1 is objectively winning for white, yes, you give up the rook here, then queen captures, and the white has a much better position. But Magnus says, nope, I will show you how chess is played. Instead of queen captures on c3, sacrifices the queen, plays c captures on b5. And okay, bishop captures, we have king captures, and now king to b8. And this is the position. Magnus with a whole lot of pieces. He has 2 bishops and a knight for a queen, which is definitely compensation. And objectively, the position is very much equal. So it's definitely a fight. Magnus with a bit more time on the clock. We have rook a to e1. Magnus centralizes his rooks. Knight to f7. We have bishop to b3, putting pressure on e6, and pawn to c5. And Magnus goes knight captures on c5. Also pawn to a4, just stopping queen captures on b5. A way of restricting black's plans. Definitely works. Magnus goes for captures on c5. Queen captures on b5, and now knight captures on e6. He goes for reclaiming a little bit of material. Queen before check, we have king to d1, and now knight to d6. Magnus captures on f8, rook captures, and now bishop to e3. It's time to activate the other pieces as well. pawn to a5, and now king to e2. We have pawn to a4. Here, it's not easy to find a plan for black. H5 with the idea of h4 or h5, h4, and then g5 is the way to look for counterplay, because you have a queen, knight, and rook, and you really want to open up lines in front of the white king. But he goes for a4, and Magnus goes bishop to e6. We have knight to b5, and now pawn to d5. Magnus starts advancing his passed pawn. Queen b2 check. We have king f3, and queen captures on a2. Now Nodrbek also creates a passed pawn on the a file. Knight to e4, and now pawn to g5, trying to open up the path towards the white king. We have knight to c5, and now, okay, the threat is knight to d7 check to pick up the rook. So rook to d8, and also, well, the d pawn is just marching forward, so the rook works very well on the d file. Rook to a1 and queen to c4. Here we have rook f to c1, attacking the queen, and there are two ways you could play this. One is the way Nodrbek played it, and the other one is, and sometimes this is a thing in chess. Sometimes, you know, there were instances, for example, with Mikhail Tal, where he was sad and almost angry that his opponent did not defend in the most in the best possible way, just so he could show what exists in the position. And here I have no idea if Magnus had this in mind or if he saw it, but I will show it because it's beautiful, and it's Nodrbek did not find it the best defense, but I will show it. Again, not because, you know, someone should have played it or could have played it, but because it's beautiful, and I think you guys will appreciate it. If knight to d4 check, this is what happens. Okay, bishop captures on d4, queen captures on d4, and rook captures on a4, attacks the queen. Okay, g4 with check, hoping that king captures, so you have some counterplay with queen to d2, but of course bishop would capture, and now after queen captures on d5, king to g3, rook to g8. And it seems like black is getting all the counterplay black needs. Now f5 will win the bishop. King h3, and now pawn to f5. And it seems like black is winning all of a sudden. But there is one problem, and that is knight to a6 check. You cannot go to the c file. If you go to the a file, okay, then you go in front of the rook. A simple knight c7 check picks up the queen. That goes without saying. So we have to capture the knight, and now look at this. Rook to b4 check forces the king to the a file, but you can't really go to a8 because bishop f3 wins the king, wins the queen. So you have to go to a7, but it doesn't work. Rook to c7 check forces the king to a8, and after king to a8, bishop f3, and white wins. So that's why, even with the best possible defense, it is winning. With 2 minutes on the clock, it's hard to say if Magnus would find it. Probably, I would say yes, but he was also playing against Nodrbek's time. Well, if Nodrbek played it. But Nodrbek played knight to c3, and then Magnus just decided to capture on c3. And again, here you can see that he's playing against Nodrbek's time because there's no threat here. Queen e2, okay, you can stop that with rook c2, and then you can bring the other rook double up, easily winning. He decides to go for rook captures on c3, which gives Nodrbek a chance to almost get back in the game, but not if you find what Magnus found. Queen captures on c3, rook captures on a4, pawn to g4 with check. Of course, bishop captures. If you capture with the king, that's terrible. You lose the bishop on e3. So bishop captures on g4, and now rook captures on d5. We have knight to d7 with check. King c7, and now look at this, knight to b6, threatening knight captures rook on d5 with a royal fork, and Nodrbek, also the threat is rook to c4 check, which would win the black queen. So Nodrbek finds a brilliant defensive resource, rook to c5, which stops rook to c4, and it also prevents knight to d5. But there is one way to break through, and it is a brilliant one. Feel free to pause the video and win the game for Magnus while I give you a couple of seconds. So, for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding this brilliant resource. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is rook to c4. The very move Nodrbek tried to stop is the move that wins the game, and sometimes chess is funny like that. And also for those of you who maybe found rook to a8, that also works. We can show rook a8. Now the threat is rook to c8, and if king captures, you still just play it. And now look at this. The rook will be captured. you will have a rook and 2 bishops versus a queen, and of course a completely winning position. You can do it that way. Rook to c4, a bit more poetic. Magnus just forces the game where he's absolutely the best. He forces the game into an endgame. And of course you have to capture. Rook captures on c4. We have knight to d5 now with check, forking the king and the queen. King to d6, knight captures, and the rook captures. And now it's 2 bishops versus a rook. And, well, it's up to Nodrbek to try and save it. We have bishop to f5. Pawn to h6, defending the pawn, and now bishop to e4, going after the b7 pawn, and Nodrbek defends it with rook to b3. The best possible way to try and save the game is pawn to b5. I guess, play for the win to try and get a draw, as they say, but Nodrbek defends the pawn with rook to b3, and now Magnus just starts slowly improving. King e2, we have rook to b2 with check, king to d3, the bishop nicely defends the pawn, so there's no worry there. Rook to b3 check, king to d2, we have king to e7, and now bishop to d5. Attacks the rook, rook b5, and bishop back to f3. We have king f7, and king to c3. Slowly but surely, going after that b7 pawn, and then you will take care of the kingside pawns. King to g7, king to c4, we have rook to b1, and now pawn to h3. So all of the pawns are defended, the light square bishop makes sure of that. Rook to e1, going after the bishop, and bishop to d2. We have rook back to b1, king to c5. Okay, you could maybe advance the pawn all the way to b5, but after bishop to b4, the pawn will simply be lost. So no point in doing that. Rook to b2, attacks the bishop, bishop to c3, and now rook back to b1. We have bishop to b4 now with the threat of bishop captures on b7, and rook to f1. You could also maybe win some time with pawn to b6 check, simply because the king has to go back, you cannot capture, but rook to f1 is also annoying for Magnus. We have king to d5, you don't want to give up the f4 pawn. Rook back to b1 and bishop to c3. Magnus abandons going after the b7 pawn and looks for a different plan. Rook c1, bishop to d4, and pawn to b5. Finally, Nodrbek advances the pawn, but now king e6. We have rook to e1 with check, king to f5, and now pawn to b4. We have bishop captures on f6 with check, king to h7, and bishop to d5. With ideas of simply guarding the b3 square, and also you can further harass the black king, win the pawn, and then start pushing your own kingside pawn. So rook to d1 goes after the bishop, king to e6, we have pawn to h5 and pawn to f5. Nodrbek gives one last check, rook to e1, and now bishop to e5, and he was in this position on move 61 that Nodrbek Abdusattorov resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. So what can you do? Okay, we could show how easily this is won. You just push the f pawn and win the game. That's pretty much it. And even if you try, advancing the b pawn, let's say f6, b3. Okay, the b3 square is guarded. Let's say f7. You'll play b2 as the bishop is pinned. You simply bring a queen. Black brings a queen, but white also delivers checkmate on the next move. So it's pretty much pointless. So yeah, brutal game, and it's. I don't know why Magnus would do such a thing. Here, after bishop captures on c3, after queen c1, maybe, okay, it looks a little bit dangerous, but it's not like only one line is winning for white. After queen c1, all of the lines are winning for white. So sacrificing the queen here is just Magnus saying, I'm going to qualify, for the main event. However I play this, let's have some fun, and let's show everyone who's boss. And then then he just gives up the queen, plays c captures on b5, and just continues playing and ends up winning a brilliant game. So the event, the preliminaries have now been finished. I will show you the standings. If you guys have any games that you would really like to see, do use hashtag suggestion, and I will gladly go over them. These are the standings. So Nepo and Magnus with 8.5 points in first place. Nepo has better additional criteria, so he is actually first, and he will be picking his opponent first for the main event. Magnus second, MBL with 7 in third place, then Arjun and Nodrbek with 6.5, Hikaru with 6, Vincent with 5.5, and Fabiano Caruana with 4.5. And players who did not qualify: Pragnananda, Richard Rapport, Gukesh, and Vidit Gujarati. So there you have it. Indians not shining bright in this scrambled pieces chess variant, but okay. This is only one event of many. I believe there are 6 of them. I could be wrong, maybe 6 or 5. So they will also get a chance to strike back. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Great game by Magnus. Great game by Nodrbek as well. But yeah, it was just a masterclass. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Peter Van Dulst, Derek King, Charles Benjamin Flynn, Diane Schwartz, and Ilya Maltsev for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.